I guess it makes sure you don't miss any items. Yo! Ah! If you've been having this like Dead Space slash Resident Evil remake slash Evil Within itch, I think I got something for you. Alright, so this is Daymare 1998, and it's a game made by Invader Studios, who was originally working on their own Resident Evil 2 remake before the official RE2 remake was announced. And Invader Studios' version was shut down by Capcom, unfortunately. But then the company decided to make their own game instead, paying homage and trying to innovate on survival horror. This is my review of that game, and I am going to talk about where this game falls short, but ultimately what it does really well. This review might contain like a few spoilers here and there, so just be aware of that. Now, Daymare is not as good as those previously mentioned games, right? But it is damn impressive, scary at times, and really fun for an indie title. This is not a AAA studio with like an infinite budget and tons of developers. And yet, like I said, if you're having that itch, this game is gonna scratch it for you, provided you are willing to put up with a few rough areas and a bit of jank here and there. So first things first, right? I'm talking about survival horror here. So is Daymare even scary? Ain't no way dude's still sleeping, bro. I'm bringing out the shotgun. Cause you got me messed up. How many shotgun bullets I got? 18. Oh shit! Oh my god! Ah! Ah! Yeah, it's definitely scary. Like towards the beginning of the game, Daymare played like some of my favorite other survival horror games, but I didn't really find it scary like those games. But definitely as time went on, the game got scarier, especially considering the areas that you find yourself in, such as like a creepy hospital or narrow alleyways in the middle of a city. I found myself to be on edge quite a few times. One of my favorite things about Daymare, and something unique to it as a survival horror game, is the fact that for several of the weapons in the game, you don't simply reload by having ammo in your inventory and then just reloading your weapon. For weapons like the handgun, you gotta have magazines, some people know them as clips, in your inventory, and you then have to load the ammo from your inventory directly into that magazine, and then the magazine can be put in your weapon. What this means is that in combat, if you have a lot of ammo saved up, you can't just always go crazy. You gotta think about how you're gonna engage these zombies, because even if you have a lot of handgun bullets, you might only have 2 magazines actually loaded with ammo. That's probably all you're gonna have access to for that encounter or during a fight. With zombies all up in your face, you're not really gonna have time to go to the inventory to load more bullets into a magazine, because managing your inventory doesn't pause the game in Daymare. Now, I believe Daymare does have 2 modes. One of them does change it to where the ammo loading system doesn't exist. So it's pretty much, you know, like any other survival horror recent game like Dead Space or the RE remake. You have bullets and you can just reload them as you please. But I definitely think you're doing yourself a disservice by not playing the game with the reload mechanics I just mentioned. It's mad tense, but it's also so much fun, especially because some weapons have 2 different kinds of ammo. So for just going through normal zombies, I might have like a magazine with normal handgun bullets loaded in it, but if I was feeling like something tough might be around the corner, I would load another magazine up with hollow points, which deal more damage, you know, just so I could be better prepared. I like having that choice. And to go along with that, you have 2 different styles of reloads. You have quick reloads, which will just drop your magazine to the floor to be picked up later whenever you want, or a slow reload with a longer animation, but your spent magazine ends up back in your inventory. This whole system is just dope as hell. It's amazing. And it really adds a lot to survival horror as a whole. And Invader Studios absolutely needs to be commended for this contribution to the genre. The biggest issue though with this game, in contrast to what was just probably one of my biggest praises for it, for me by far, is one of the main characters, Sam. You do play multiple characters in this game, but Sam specifically has an in-game model and voice actor that are just both absolutely awful.
Doc, I'm looking for someone. A real nasty son of a bitch who got here shortly before I did. That bastard's got an outstanding account with me, and I came to collect. Now you listen to me. I ain't gonna tell you again. Open the goddamn door!
However,
what was that? It's distracting how bad it is. Like, it's just hard not to comment on just how bad all of it was. Now, Invader Studios is based in Italy, if I'm recalling correctly, and I imagine, most of the voice actors probably don't speak English as their primary language. It just sucks because the other voice actors are fine. It's just Sam that is really bad, and he brings the game down a decent amount, unfortunately. The Dead Space itch, however, that I was talking about previously is scratched by Sam, however, as he does suffer from a psychological condition, so he sees things that aren't really there. And while it is utilized fairly well for some decent scares, in my opinion, I feel like they could have done just a little bit more with it. Maybe a few more cutscenes where Sam fails to distinguish what's real from what's fake, as that was some of the scariest stuff this game throws at you by far. One thing I do want to give this game credit for, though, is its length. Most people can probably beat this game in about 7 to 8 hours, but it has the benefit of not feeling like a 7 to 8 hour game, if you understand what I'm saying. I found myself often being really surprised when I would save the game, like, oh, my save file only has 2 hours on it. I could have swore I've been playing for like 4 hours or maybe even more. And I think that's because in general, this game is a good time to be had. And because of its often tense nature, moments that are actually seconds long can feel like a struggle that lasts minutes, but in a good way though. All right, next I want to talk about locations, because the settings in this game are just an absolute treat to any survival horror fan, and arguably the best thing about this game. They're just so damn good. We start out in a research facility of this game's version of the, Umbrella Corporation, essentially. This is typically a locale where a lot of these games would actually end, but here we get it right in the beginning location, which is a nice change of pace in my opinion. It's dark, creepy, and the environmental storytelling, is done really well to show that an outbreak just recently happened here. Very recently, actually. Overall, a great location to start with. We then go straight into the town for a segment that reminds me a lot of the beginning of Resident Evil 2, and I loved every second of it. This is probably the first time in the game that it's screaming at you, hey idiot, you gotta run, you know what I'm saying? This is not the part where you fight every enemy, and I liked that a lot. It's that kind of tense horror to where you just narrowly escape a zombie lunging at you, but you can kind of like feel its hand just barely missing your shoulder. In real life, it actually gave me the creeps. Then we go into what is probably going to be many people's favorite segment of the game, which is the hospital. This place is creepy, I won't lie to you. It's where I had a few scares, and it's where the game really starts to pick up with the scares and the challenge in general. The environment here is just creepy, plain and simple. If they had moments of where Sam's flashlight maybe stopped working due to his hallucinations, oh, that'd be absolutely sick. It'd be terrifying. Now, next, and my personal favorite is when you first start playing as the character Raven and you're playing through a few different parts of the city. The city segments overall in any survival horror game, they're my favorite overall survival horror setting when done right. It's clear the devs were going for a Resident Evil 3 inspired type feel during this chapter, and they did it so much justice. There was a segment with the bus. I was legit stressing because of the amount of enemies thrown at me combined with my low ammo count. It was everything I want in a survival horror. I was stressing, y'all. And there's even a puzzle or two here. There's even a great environmental storytelling here as well, in a place with a few shops and like a basketball court where you can see that one of the canisters was dropped on this city that spread the virus in the first place. This spot just heavily leans into those Resident Evil 3 vibes. I'm telling you, I loved every second of it. Now next, we got the sewers, right? It isn't bad, and its tight quarters do lend itself to feeling really tense, which is nice. I'm personally not a big fan of the sewer locale in survival horror though, but it's done well here, and it didn't bring down the experience at all for sure. Enemy placement was really good in this segment, and it's also home to a pretty creepy boss fight. Then you end up in a gas station slash like lumberyard-esque area. I don't really know how to describe it. This one's unremarkable, but does lead to a crash site. It's not bad by any means, but it's definitely probably the least interesting place throughout the entire game, for sure. Then you retrek through that Resident Evil 3 inspired city segment. Yo, I loved it, but you go the opposite way as a different character. So I was insanely happy to be going back to that location. All the same praise applies this time around as well, because you don't really feel like it's backtracking for the sake of backtracking, because areas you couldn't access before are now available to you. And then the game's last major locale is the headquarters in this area for this game's version of the Umbrella Corporation. It's okay. You know, I remember it being really scary and tense at times. I had one really bad scare here, but I think the place itself was scary mostly due to my lack of ammo at the time. But in general, the atmosphere was plenty dark and scary. It just didn't come close to the city segments for me personally, but it was still really good. Combat is a mixed bag for me in this game. It's mostly good, I'd say, but it has some jankiness to it that I definitely got used to, but never entirely shook off. You know what I mean? Like, there's a strange cooldown between actions, such as taking a shot and switching weapons. Like, and there's like a stiffness or a slugginess to the combat, but I don't know if that's just to do with my controller specifically, as I was using a PS5 controller. Like I said, I did eventually get used to it, and I wouldn't say it detracted from the experience at all. Just something to be aware of going in. The reason I wouldn't say it detracted from the experience at all is, like I said, these guys were trying to pay homage to advanced survival horror. So having combat slightly sluggish may have actually worked in the game's benefit. I can't say for sure, but like I said, it isn't going to ruin the experience. And the game does have a mercenaries type mode though, so I'm imagining that is probably where the combat system's frustrations or lack thereof are probably going to be most apparent. But the combat system, I would say, is good enough to have a lot of fun within the survival horror experience that this developer has crafted. Absolutely. Next, let's talk sound and graphics together. Now, I'm not someone who cares too much about sound in video games, right? At least not enough to dive into it in my video game reviews. However, survival horror games are the exception to that rule for me. And again, for an indie game studio, the sound here is really scary, right? My only complaint is, having played this game with speakers, zombies frequently sounded like they were behind me when they weren't, which did throw me off, but that could be something specific to my setup, so I'm not gonna really deduct anything for that. I can't be sure. Like I said though, the sound gets outright, like, just legit creepy at times. There were moments on stream where, like, a special infected zombie would be screaming off in the distance, this, like, horrible, blood-curdling scream, and I literally stopped dead in my tracks to go, what the hell was that? And just stand there for a minute, weapons drawn, to be sure that I wasn't about to just get massacred, right? The graphics are good. Again, considering this isn't a AAA studio, I think the graphics are good. Amazing? Nah, but still good. The highlights being, as mentioned previously, the settings and the models on the zombies and special infected themselves are really good. They're super, they get the point across. The settings, again, all hit. Pretty much all the settings hit, just some not being as great as others. And I haven't really talked about it, but these zombie models, man, just outright creepy, grotesque, very well done. You do get tired a little bit of seeing the special infected, because I don't think there's that much variance in their models, but the zombies themselves look amazing, right? But the main characters and mouth movements, specifically during cutscenes and stuff like that, those are kind of lackluster, right? Especially Sam's model. I'm sorry to slam on Sam so much, but oh my god, his model was so bad. It's like they took a generic white dude character model and just gave it dark skin and just the most patchiest, horrible beard they possibly could. It was so unbelievable that Sam was actually a black dude, and it just looked awful, man. I'm telling you, it just didn't look good. But gratefully, Sam isn't the only character you play, so it doesn't detract from the game all that much. Again, I'm probably giving these dudes a pass because I learned during this interview process that it's an Italian game studio, but still, I mean, could have done a little bit more research on how brothers look and made a more convincing black character. I just don't believe that Sam is black at all. I cannot believe that character is actually black by looking at his model in game. I just can't. But overall though, Daymare 1998 is a really solid survival horror game. If you've beaten already a ton of these games, of these third-person survival horror games like Dead Space, Resident Evil remakes, and Evil Within, and you need something to scratch that very same itch, albeit while maybe not being quite as good as those games, this is absolutely going to do that for you. I'd give Daymare an absolute, 8 out of 10 for Daymare 1998. 8 out of 10 for sure if I had to give it a score. With one caveat though, the final boss and final segment are pretty frustrating, and just a bad game design, feels like this wasn't play tested at all kind of way. I was having fun majority of the time playing this game, but during that segment specifically was the only time I felt like I was playing a 6 out of 10 game. But since that segment isn't reflective of the entire experience overall, I am gonna stick to my 8 out of 10 for Daymare 1998. I appreciate y'all checking out the review. If you liked the video and stuck around this long, I'd appreciate it if you subscribe. But if not, man, hey, I'll catch y'all on the next video. Thanks for checking me out. Peace.